大家好，欢迎收看报告来了。在刚刚结束的12月政治局会议和中央经济工作会议上，中国高层对2024年经济发展方向做出了重要部署。高盛中国首席经济学家闪辉在解读两次会议时表示，会议传递了清晰的政策信号，尤其是对消费优先、货币宽松以及财政扩张的强调值得关注。下面就来看看本频道对闪辉首席发言的总结吧，英文原声在视频最后。闪辉指出，12月的中央政治局会议释放了一些显著的政策信号，例如，货币政策的表述从过去多年的稳健转为适度宽松，这一措辞自2009至2010年全球金融危机以来首次被使用。这种变化让市场联想到当年的大规模货币宽松政策，提振了投资者对未来政策加码的预期。与中央政治局会议相比，中央经济工作会议的政策变化较小，更多是对前者内容的扩展。最大的亮点在于会议将扩大内需和消费作为首要任务，这在过去几年里尚属首次。与去年强调科技与创新为重点不同，今年的重点转移到消费，表明政府决心通过提振国内需求来拉动经济。闪辉指出，今年的政策讨论中，政府更加关注如何提高居民收入以刺激消费。相比以往侧重中产阶级的政策，此次特别提及低收入和中低收入群体，包括提高农村和城镇基础养老金，以及增加针对灵活就业人员的保障措施。此外，消费刺激计划可能会继续扩展，例如通过家电和汽车补贴等政策，直接推动居民购买意愿，同时增强医疗保险补贴，完善社保体系，以减少居民因不确定性储蓄的需求。这些措施旨在为消费者创造更有利的消费环境。货币政策方面，中央经济工作会议明确表示将继续降息，并可能推出新的货币政策工具。闪辉预计，2024年中国央行将下调利率40个基点。同时，会议强调非常规逆周期调节政策的使用，表明政府在应对经济下行压力时可能采取更多创新措施。财政政策将更加宽松。闪辉指出，相较于2023年的积极且保持可持续，2024年的财政政策措辞明显偏宽松。特别是中央和地方政府专项债券的使用预计会增加，用于支持重点基建项目、地方债务化解和房地产去库存等领域。他预测2024年新增的政府债券发行可能高达3万亿元。然而，对于市场高度关注的房地产政策，会议并未透露更多实质性内容，延续了稳地产的基本思路。闪辉表示，虽然继续推动城市更新和去库存政策，但尚未看到大规模刺激楼市的迹象，这或许表明政府希望房地产市场逐步恢复，而非依赖过度干预。在谈到未来经济走势时，闪辉表示，中国经济的复苏需要全方位努力，包括通过稳定就业、提升居民收入、提振股市和房地产市场信心等手段，为消费增长创造长期动力。他强调，仅仅依靠短期补贴难以形成持续性消费增长，政策需聚焦于增强居民长期的收入预期和消费信心。总的来看，中国政府已明确传递出支持经济增长的强烈意图。无论是政策语言的变化，还是针对消费和财政的具体措施，都显示出经济刺激的决心。但如何在提升内需的同时保持经济的可持续性，仍将是决策者需要面对的挑战。下面是闪辉英文讲话。
And good morning, everyone, for dialing in. It started with the December Politburo meeting. That was the highest level of decision making in China. And the Politburo meeting was, in terms of the language, was a notable upside surprise, just given the fact that they used some of the words that they either didn't use before or used in a long time ago. For example, the phrase about unconventional countercyclical measures or unconventional above and beyond normal, extraordinary, depending on how you translate it, but you get the gist that this is a special situation, so we need to really step up countercyclical easing measures. That was not used before, so was a upside surprise. And another change at the Politburo meeting was the description on monetary policy. We know at this stage of the cycle, we need more fiscal policy, but the description of China's monetary policy stance, changing that from a prudent, which has been used since 2011, to moderately loose, which was last used in 2009, 2010. You can imagine that give investors a lot of hope and potentially thinking about the easing, the massive easing during the GFC. So the Politburo meeting was a bigger change. On the back of the Politburo meeting, 3 days later, we had this Central Economic Work Conference. So compared to Politburo, the delta doesn't seem to be as big because the Central Economic Conference pretty much just expanded a little bit on the Politburo meeting and didn't really introduce as big of a change in the language or in terms of raising expectations. So the overall takeaway from the Central Economic Work Conference is in line, given what we already know about the December Politburo meeting. But there are some interesting bits that we want to share with our audience. I think that if there's one takeaway from Central Economic Work Conference, if you just want to take away one thing, that's the emphasis on consumption. In the Central Economic Work Conference, if you pull out last year's readout versus this year's readout, the main body of the readout has the 9 points, focus areas or key messages. All the other things are pretty much similar, talking about reforms, opening up, urban-rural development, people's livelihood, so on and so forth. Those are, the order is the same, the language is slightly different, but this year they changed it to move consumption at the number 1. Last year was technology and innovation. That was the number 1, and this year is consumption and boosting domestic demand. So I think that's the most important change and is a clear signal that they want to focus on consumption. Now we get a lot of questions, how do you focus on consumption? How is this time different? There are 2 differences. When I read 2023, the paragraph on domestic demand and consumption, it reads as if the government just want to create an environment where people want to consume, where this time around there's a clear emphasis on income. So I think that's an improvement because people need income to consume. You can't just boost consumption by having more, festivals or travel holidays. People have to have confidence and income to consume. So there's more emphasis on that. And the subtle difference is that last time when they talk about increasing income, they talk about middle class, where this time around the focus was more on low and mid-income households. For example, increasing basic pension for retirees. For rural pension, the rural retirees, the basic pension right now is very low. So there's definitely room to increase. In terms of specific areas, it confirmed our baseline expectation. Consumer goods trading program will be continued and broadened. There's a bit of a discussion about also increasing the support or subsidy for medical insurance. So overall, we think the consumption message, increasing income, increasing or improving the social safety net somewhat is a positive signal. Let me lastly finish with a few sort of thinking about monetary policy, fiscal policy, property policy, compared to December Politburo meeting. Did we learn anything new from policymakers? On monetary policy, the CEWC explicitly mentioned we need to triple our cut policy rate. So that's already in a lot of forecasters' baseline, including ours. we are expecting 40 basis points of interest rate cut next year. And there's also a phrase about creating new tools of a monetary policy. Not exactly sure what that means, but it's interesting, especially in light of what they talk about unconventional countercyclical measures. Fiscal policy compared 2023 CEWC versus the 2024 CEWC, a clear shift, more dovish, because back then it was talking about proactive fiscal policy, but there's still a little bit of a remain disciplined and emphasizing sustainability. Where this time around, it's very clear, increasing deficit, more ultra long-term central government special bond, increasing the different uses of a local government special bond. So it's a very clear signal fiscal will have to expand, and we're expecting about 3 trillion more of a government bond issuance in 2025 versus 2024. Property is a somewhat disappointing. We didn't hear anything new beyond stabilizing the property sector. The policies being mentioned continue that destocking process. We know that has been very slow and somewhat missing expectations after PBOC introduced that relending program to destock local excess properties. And there's a continued emphasis using urban village renovation. This was explained by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Rural Development in October. So nothing new, doesn't seem to be a major policy in the property sector. They want to stabilize the property sector, but not sure how exactly. So those are the key takeaways from the CEWC. And sure, yeah, so it is when it comes to China stimulus, there are a lot of numbers being thrown around, and clients will ask me, oh, there's rumor about 10 trillion or 10 trillion stimulus or 10% GDP. We have to be very clear about what we are talking about. Otherwise, you're comparing apples to oranges. So first of all, the level of government bond issuance is already very high, right? This year, despite the very weak domestic demand, if you look at how much government issued bond, 9 trillion, that's not small. So the level is high, but when we are talking about economic growth, you only focus on delta. Right? Even if next year you have another 9 trillion, you say, oh, the 9 trillion, that's a lot, but there's no increase. So that doesn't help your GDP growth. So what we really care about is that 3 trillion delta. The 3 trillion delta is about 2.5% of GDP, and it's a sizable. Where does it going to help in the economy? Some of that will be used to recapitalize large banks. Some of that will be used for local government to buy back raw land and empty apartments, things like that. And some of that will be used for subsidy for consumer goods trade-in program and the strategically important major projects in major areas. So there's a wide range of areas that the government will want to use the money to help the economy, because we have the real economy slowing, which in turn put pressure on the financial system. You need to help all of these different areas. So what, as an investor, what you really want to focus on is that delta. That's something I want to emphasize. As an investor, when you hear, 5 trillion, 10 trillion, first of all, you need to know, is that the level or is that the change? And then you need to know, are we just talking about the overall augmented fiscal deficit, or are we talking about the top line fiscal deficit? So there's a lot of sort of nuances and careful calibration necessary to figure out how is that going to impact the economy. All in all, the economy needs a lot of help. Private sector is weak. We need a central government to step in. So the recent decline in Chinese 10-year central government bond, it was faster than we had thought. We thought that the direction makes sense, that we need more easing, especially monetary policy easing. So therefore, rates are on a downward trend, but the speed of a decline was a surprise. And in retrospect, that was linked to the December Politburo meeting you were asking about earlier, because of the change in monetary policy stance was more than market was expecting, right? If you're really going to change the stance to the 2009-2010 level, and then you look at the playbook in 2008-2009 global financial crisis, what did monetary policy do back then? It was a very aggressive cutting. So therefore, market all of a sudden was trying to price in a much more aggressive monetary policy easing. Hence, you see these rates coming down significantly. And the second point about reflation, if market believes that cutting rates will help speed up the reflation process, perhaps the 10-year rates shouldn't come down so much. However, I think the view is that monetary policy will only be able to do limited amount in helping the whole reflation process. If you think about the CEWC talk about we need to control the excessive competition in various industries. So that doesn't really respond to monetary policy easing as much. So if you think about these two are separate, reflation is going to be much harder because you need to control local government incentives and corporates decision capex and competition. That's going to take a lot longer. Whereas if we are using monetary policy 2008, 2009 as a playbook, then the rate cut will be coming in much faster. Balancing the two, you get 10-year yield down below 1.9 now.
Understood. Thank you, Hui. And then just last on the top down side, on the macro side, if we think about that support for consumption, you talked about some trade-in programs potentially being extended, maybe both the scale and the scope goes up. What else do you think happens potentially around that consumption support? And then we can get into some of the market implications for Kinja.
Yeah, on consumption, in a way, there's really no sort of a very easy solution, right? You can't force people to consume. So all you can do is to incentivize them. Hence the consumer goods trade-in program, and that has been relatively successful. And the second bucket is the sort of increasing employment, increasing income, and therefore stabilizing stock market, stabilizing property market to help boost the confidence. So if you have jobs and income on the one hand and the confidence on the other hand, then you have a better chance of boosting consumption. I think that's the way the government is thinking about. I thought it was interesting. They talk about increasing income of a low to middle income households, increasing even the social safety net on the medical support. That's going to help you sort of reduce your incentive to save for medical emergencies as an indirect way to support consumption. They also talk about for flexible workers, the DD drivers, or all these people. China has a large flexible worker group, and they talk about increase their labor protection. So in a way, if you increase their income, and that's a sizable share of the labor force, that can also help their income, help their consumption. So I think of it as the auto subsidy, the home appliance subsidy, broadening that's more direct, almost a sugar high. You give the subsidy, people buy, consumption comes up. But at the same time, you also need to do the hard work, helping the stock market, helping the property market, helping the labor market, helping the income prospect, helping something that's more sustainable. Every month you give people money, not just the 1 month to give them a consumption coupon, and the next month there's no consumption anymore. You need something that help their expectation. I get this extra money month after month, and therefore I can be reassured it's okay to increase my consumption.
如果你喜欢我们的内容，记得点赞、订阅我们的频道。报告来了，我们将持续为你带来最新的投资银行报告解读和商业热点分析，帮助你抓住市场机会。感谢收看，我们下期再见。